It was a chance to go through some of the sort of live bits and pieces that didn't exist, that hadn't been out before, and that actually proved to be quite entertaining in the end. Peter and I just used to play together at school, mainly old soul music. And when one holidays, Ant and Mike decided they were going to make a tape of their songs, and Ant said, "Do you want to come along?" You know, and so I said, "Okay, I'll come along." And I said, "Shall I bring Peter? Because you know we got a song we'd quite like to do as well." And originally Ant was assuming he was going to sing his own songs, and you know he hasn't got the greatest voice in the world. But he started off, and I did suggest after we'd done the first song on that first demo tape that I thought Peter had a slightly better voice, and maybe it'd be good if he sang the other songs as well as the song that we were doing together. You know, none of us had the courage to do it. So we had this friend called John Alexander, who was kind of a bit more well, he had a bit more spirit perhaps than the rest of us, and he just rushed up to him and charged and put it in his hand and said, "Listen to this." Some of the suggestions were very kind of dodgy at the time, I think. Some embarrassing names. I seem to remember one, the Champagne Meadow or something. You know? Can you imagine it? Anyhow, it was 67, I told you. So he just suggested Genesis because it's nice and simple. He thought, oh, sounds all right. So we put it out under the name Genesis, and it kind of it stuck. We knew that if we wanted to do the kind of music we were interested in, that he wouldn't be right for us because he wanted to simplify us all the time. He impressed us because he was the only guy who could do this ba-bum, ba-ba-ba-bum riff, which is what we really were looking for a drummer to do, you know. First time we did Friars was at 71 or something. We were starting to kind of get to the stage where we would go to a place and you'd support some group, and then you'd go back again as headliners, and the little pockets were picking up, you know. The Friars was one place, and the other Farks club in Southall was the other one that kind of seemed to be those that would particularly stick in the brain as being places we used to go back to and be very popular, you know, and it just sort of seemed to grow really, and the Aylesbury crowd was just so enthusiastic, it just got sort of, it snowballed really. There was a circuit in England you could play, which was the sort of progressive rock circuit, and which was, you know, we used to follow all these people around, I suppose. Well, loads of us doing it, and some sort of have proved to didn't last very long, and other ones have lasted a long time. And it was kind of mixed up with the blues boom at the period too. You know, it was sort of like progressive stroke blues was what all these clubs would call themselves. And I was the one who really made the suggestion that I think we had to get a better drummer, because if we were going to start again, you know, we needed to get more strength in that area, particularly if we were going to have Ant, who was a very strong contributor to the writing of the group and everything. So that's when we auditioned really for both a drummer and a guitarist at the same time. We wanted drummers who could play, you know, soft music as well as hard music, and could sort of adjust and have sensitivity and all the rest of it. Poor guy, I think he did hear originally that he kind of had got the gig because of his jokes, you know, so he was madly sort of, you know, trying to think of jokes all the time, every time he got in the van, so he'd have something to say. But no, I mean, I think, you know, we'd had there was always a good humour within the band, I think. There's never been a problem with that, I think. It's just that sort of, it was just, I think, good to have someone who was outside the sort of school kind of grouping. Early 60s was very sort of, you know, you started pop music kind of developed. There was only kind of one level of pop music almost, you know, that kind of went up, and it got more and more adventurous in a sense with the Beatles and the Beach Boys and people like that, and the Move and Pink Floyd and Procol Harum of that period. And at a certain point, they started to divide into two really, and you had the kind of the simple stuff, which got simpler in the 70s, and then you got the more complicated stuff, which kind of got more complicated. And we're obviously in that second strand really, very much a sort of live based thing. You know, you never got played on the radio really, and I think we were sort of like definitely a cult group, so you attracted a following for that reason, that you kind of like, not everybody liked you, which was a good thing. The other thing we discovered obviously was that as soon as when Pete went on stage in Dublin with wearing a red dress and a fox's head, you know, that we ended up on the front page of Melody Maker. So this sort of said something to us, you know, this is the first time we'd ever been noticed, you know. And I think that kind of one thing led to another, and it sort of brought out a natural, because Pete is an introvert, really, and it was a way of, you know, of appearing, I suppose. It's a way of getting over that stage problem. You go out there and you put on a costume and you act a part, and it works. He's co-founders of the band, if you like, as best friends. That's what we were, you know. So it kind of was a great personal blow. But to be honest, we had sort of, I think, within the band, we weren't as close as we were because we used to fight too much, because we both cared too much. We're both very obstinate people, and that was perhaps, you know, there was a sort of inevitability about it. You know, I think the band had just got too many sort of creative personalities in it, and somebody had to go, really. And Peter was the only one who could go, because the only one who really had an alternative career to go to.
And naturally, Genesis members, current and ex, have become something of an extended, occasionally dysfunctional family. Putting together the archive box set was a labour of love that took years of emptying out attics in the members' houses and in the subconscious minds as well.
It's still a question of how much we can fit on, really. Because we've got to take off, in order to put on one or two of these, we've got to take some off. The first two CDs are the Lamb Live. Then the third CD is more live stuff, which is other songs that weren't recorded live with Peter singing. So we got particularly songs like From Selling Them by the Pound, songs like Dancing with the Moon at Night. Also Supper's Ready, which was the sort of what you might call the key track of the period, which we never had on record with Peter singing. This is a version which was actually done on the Selling England tour, which again sounds really good, I think. There's a lot of stuff that people have never heard before, and really should never have heard ever. And then the fourth CD is the real archive one, I suppose, which starts with something from that first tape we played to Jonathan King, which was sort of done in reverse chronology actually, because the sound quality kind of is a bit better at the front of the album. Because that first tape, the only version we could find was my version of it, which was a copy of a copy of a copy, I think. And I don't know if it was running or what it was running at. It was probably 15/16, you know. So it's pretty shaky, but it sounds quite nice in its own way. Got character. But the other stuff on it there's little bits and pieces which are demos of songs that have not been heard before by anybody, and other demos of songs that have appeared elsewhere. I thought that I only got about, I think, 30 or 40% of what we did prior to. This is prior to Genesis Revelation, so we're talking very early days here, or prior to Trespass anyhow. And I thought that I was under the impression that other people had some too. I'm sure Peter's got some stuck somewhere in some tuck box or something that he doesn't know about, you know, he's forgotten about.
I think when I left, you know, I felt pretty guilty about everything, and one of the things that Tony took over was the guardian of the tapes, but he's still convinced I kept a few behind, but I couldn't find them. There may still be something somewhere.
I think originally when we left, he denies this of course, but when we left, finally left Jonathan King, we went into the offices and we took some tapes each, and I thought, you know, that we took a few each, but he seems to think I took all the ones that were there, in which case the others are either lost or somewhere else.
Purists may be startled that Peter Gabriel chose to re-record some of his vocals for the archive box set, including many parts of The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway.
Carpet crawlers, eat their callers. We gotta get in to get out.
I mean, relearning all those songs. I don't know if I can play that fast anymore, you know. No, it's, well, Peter can't get the high notes anymore, as I said before. We could lower some of the keys, I suppose. I don't have any particular desire to do it.